Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question asks if I can analyze the Byron David Smith case. This case involves a double homicide committed in 2012 on Thanksgiving Day. Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I'll put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. So first I'll look at the background of Smith. I'll move to the timeline of the crime, and then provide my analysis. Starting with the background, Byron David Smith was 64 at the time of the homicides. He lived alone in his residence, which was located in Little Falls, Minnesota. Smith was retired from the U.S. State Department, where he worked as a security engineer. So he used to protect embassies by developing and implementing surveillance systems. So it was a fairly technical job. Less than a month before the crime, Smith had called the police to report a burglary. As they were investigating, they realized that not only had Smith's house been burglarized, but his detached garage had been too. Smith was not aware of the other burglary. Smith would later say that he was burglarized many other times as well. Smith installed a security system and carried a pistol when inside his house. Smith suspected that the people who burglarized his home were high school students, 18-year-old Haley Kiefer and 17-year-old Nicholas Brady. These two were cousins. Now moving to the timeline of the crime. We go to November 22, 2012, Thanksgiving Day. Smith drove his vehicle to a neighbor's house and parked it there. Smith said that he was visiting that neighbor when he saw Kiefer driving toward his house. He told the neighbor that he needed to go back and prepare for Kiefer. Smith walked home. He activated an audio recording device. He also had that surveillance system that captured video outside the home. He set himself up in a chair in his basement, removing light bulbs so that no one could see him. Smith already had water and food there. Apparently, this is a place he had sat and waited before. Brady then breaks into one of the first floor windows, it was a bedroom window, with a pipe, and he makes entry. Smith quietly waited in the basement for about 7 minutes, at which time Brady started walking down the basement steps. Smith aimed his rifle at Brady. This was a Ruger Mini-14. He shot Brady twice. Brady fell down to the bottom of the steps, and Smith shot him again in the head. He wrapped the body in a tarp, but not before taunting Brady's dead body. Smith walked up the steps, but a few minutes later he went back down the basement. He hid again in that chair and reloaded his weapon. 10 minutes later, the other teenager, Kiefer, makes entry into the house and starts calling for Brady. She started walking down the basement steps when Brady shot her. The action of the Ruger Mini-14 became jammed, so Smith could not continue to fire. He drew his high-standard .9 .22 caliber single-action revolver and fired several shots into Kiefer's torso. He shot her once more under the chin, killing her. Smith did not want to disturb the police on Thanksgiving. He called a neighbor the next day and asked for a recommendation for an attorney. Later, he asked the neighbor to call the police. As the police started investigating, there was no doubt that Kiefer and Brady were in the commission of a burglary when they were shot. Brady's car contained evidence connecting him to another burglary, which occurred the night before Thanksgiving. Additionally, Brady was being investigated for stealing drugs from his sister. This case has created an interesting debate around what is referred to as the Castle Doctrine. Generally, in areas where the Castle Doctrine is in place, if a person burglarizes a home, the homeowner, or any other lawful resident of the home, can use deadly force. There is no duty to retreat when somebody is inside their own home. It does not necessarily give somebody the right to kill the intruder. Deadly force is different than killing, although, as the name implies, the application of deadly force often results in death. The state of Minnesota had a version of the Castle Doctrine in place. Essentially, the law allows the use of reasonable force. Killing another human can be done when necessary in resisting or preventing an offense, which the actor reasonably believes exposes the actor or another to great bodily harm or death, or preventing the commission of a felony in the actor's place of abode. Many people believe that Smith would have been protected by this law if he had not finished both of these victims off execution style. That wasn't the only reason he was in trouble, though. It was not smart of him to make the audio recording. He recorded himself saying, "In your left eye." Later, he would shoot Kiefer near her left eye. He also said, "I realize I don't have an appointment, but I would like to see one of the lawyers here." This implies that he knew there was going to be a violent confrontation which would require the services of a lawyer. He made some other bizarre statements on the recording. For example, he suggested that the legal system would have released the perpetrators in 6 months to 2 years, at which time they would need money and be out for revenge. So he was really saying that the justice system would not incarcerate the perpetrators for a long enough period of time to keep him safe. Initially, he was charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder, but in April of 2013, he was indicted on 2 counts of first-degree murder. At the trial, the jurors were particularly mortified when they heard the recordings. Those did not sit well. In April of 2014, the jury would convict him on all counts after deliberating for only 3 hours. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. So now moving to the analysis, was Smith actually guilty of murder? Was this the correct verdict? I think there were 4 key factors that resulted in his conviction. The audio recordings, where he was taunting the victims, and he seemed calm. I think this was a major component. He didn't seem afraid. It seemed more deliberate and done in a relatively calm state than a situation where he believed he was in imminent danger. The second item, premeditation. He moved his truck away from the house. This made it look like he was trying to lure the victims in. He had a tarp ready, and he moved the body out of the way. This made it seem as though he was trying to make sure the second victim didn't see the first victim on the ground and run away. Third item, the final shots to the head. This does seem more like an execution than self-defense. The intent and the timing of these shots matter. If he had struck them in the head as part of his initial volley, I don't think anybody would have worried about it. But because he waited and deliberately shot them in the head, I think that got him in trouble. The fourth item, not calling the police immediately when he heard the window break, and not calling anybody for a day. I think the situation is an example of how somebody who was frustrated by being a victim of burglaries took the law into his own hands. It would appear that on Thanksgiving Day in 2012, Smith wanted to kill whoever was going to break in his house. Like it really wasn't about stopping them or protecting himself. He wanted them to die. Therefore, I think he was guilty. I think this really speaks to the idea that self-defense can never really be planned. Somebody can be prepared to defend themselves, like they can carry a weapon, but they can't try to force a situation where there will be a deadly confrontation. Even though I do believe that Smith was guilty, it is worth noting that these 2 teenagers would be alive if they had not committed multiple felonies that day. They put themselves in a very hazardous situation. Burglary, as it turns out, is a dangerous career choice. Considering that they had stolen medications in the past and a friend reported that Kiefer had a drug problem, it seems reasonable to believe that they were stealing to fuel a drug habit. Addiction is a serious problem that can lead to death in a variety of ways. There are these theories out there that Kiefer and Brady were not really trying to cause trouble. They were just 2 kids having fun. They weren't trying to hurt Smith. Almost like Kiefer was there selling Girl Scout cookies and everything went terribly wrong. Maybe she was out of Thin Mints and this caused tempers to flare. Or perhaps they were there to return medications they had stolen on a prior occasion, along with a few $100 bills for Smith's trouble. I don't think this is likely. Considering Brady broke in using a pipe after attempting to destroy one of the security cameras, I think it's reasonable to believe that they didn't have Smith's best interest in mind. As far as Smith's state of mind, there's no way to know for sure what he was thinking. It seems as though at some point he was legitimately afraid. That's why he installed the surveillance system and carried a firearm around his house. Living under the threat of burglary could create a great deal of anxiety and could explain some of his behavior, but not the premeditation and execution parts. On the audio recording, he is heard talking to himself, which is actually not unusual, but the content was worrisome, and he didn't appear to understand how people would view what he was saying. It's like he was disconnected from that empathy component. He didn't realize that people would feel empathy for the victims. Evidently, Smith had no criminal record, no history of violence, nothing to predict this behavior. Clearly, he wasn't a good criminal. I think this is a case where people committed serious crimes on both sides. Their lives intersected on that Thanksgiving Day, and the result was disastrous. Those are my thoughts on the Byron David Smith case. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. I hope you have a happy Thanksgiving. Thanks for watching.